I just want to thank you all for coming and for coming to the Accelerating the Transportation Infrastructure, the Future of Autonomous Vehicles. So it's going to be an intimate conversation, so feel free to chime in and contribute to the discussion. My name is Brian Cabezas. I was the coordinator and organizer for this event. And I'm going to pass it off to Jillian, who's going to tell you about Agrion and all the services we offer.
Thanks, Brian. I like that intro. I feel very important here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you so much to Dan and Hodgson Russ for hosting in this awesome space. We're also invited to their holiday party, their New Year's party, so we can watch the ball drop. So mark your calendars. Just kidding. Quick intro to Agrion and Grid Market. We are digital and physical marketplace creators to be an industry catalyst and help grow the clean tech, distributed energy resource, sustainability industry. We do it through intimate roundtable discussions and working groups like this one right here. We host webinars, we produce custom industry content, best practice reports, white papers, industry market research and surveys, anything that's going to help gather some information and resources to move everything forward. Huge project of ours right now is Grid Market, which is a digital resource marketplace, and it is for distributed energy resources, mainly energy storage, but also solar, microgrids, anything under that window. And it's actually a website right now, but we are growing it to be an active presence in the market. And so we want any sort of information that people have on current projects, potential projects, sites that they want a feasibility study put together for a potential distributed energy resource. So anyone with a potential site, with any questions on Grid Market, want to get involved, speak to me, Brian, or Nick, and we'll hand it off to the experts now. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Well, this is great that we have a nice, intimate crowd. I'm hoping that we're going to have more of a dialogue and a conversation. Many years ago, when I was a little kid, I went to the New York World's Fair. It was one of my favorite events in my life, and several promises were made at the World's Fair. One is that we would all have video phones, the AT exhibit, and of course now you can all carry around your video phones. And if you went to any of the so you're too young to remember this fun stuff. But if you went to the GM or the Ford or the other exhibits, they all had Futuramas and all about the cars of the future. And we were all going to be driving around cars. And, of course, the Jetsons were on TV then, so we were all going to be flying in our cars. So we got our video phones, but we don't have our self-driving cars yet. But we are moving towards automation and automated vehicles. And the three people who are here with us today really are leaders in the policy and the actual implementation of those type of issues. And it's really a great panel. So I'm going to ask what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the panel members to introduce themselves and say what their role is. Then I'm going to ask them to go back and after we introduce everybody who's here, we'll ask folks to tell a little more about what their own role is. And then we're going to ask some questions and we're going to try to open this up to a nice dialogue. So if you would just start with Keith, tell us what you do and what briefly your role is related to automation and automated cars.
Okay. Well, we don't have automated cars just yet. As you know. I'm Keith Kerman. I'm the Chief Fleet Officer for the City of New York and Deputy Commissioner in an agency called DCATS. City of New York has the largest municipal fleet in the United States with 28,000 vehicles. It's your police vehicles, fire vehicles, sanitation vehicles, and the rest. And as part of Mayor de Blasio's Vision Zero, we've been tasked with a number of kind of risk and safety related issues. Vision Zero being this goal to kind of eliminate traffic fatalities on New York City streets. And one of them is to look at the design, the kind of systematic look at the design of vehicles for safety and what can be done to redesign vehicles for safety. We'll talk more about that.
Cool. Camille?
Camille Kamga. I'm a professor at the City University of New York, at City College, the School of Engineering, and I'm teaching transportation and under the civil engineering department, and also I'm the leading the director of the University Transportation Research Center. It's a federally funded center, a consortium of 19 universities, and doing research on transportation, education, and tech transfer. So trying to push whatever research is done, educate the professionals, and implement the research. And I'm also a member of the ITS New York Board of Directors. So ITS New York is Intelligent Transportation Society of New York, and trying to push any technology in transportation.
Very cool. So Hudson?
I'm Sudarshan Sundarajan with Booz Allen, and I've primarily been involved in ITS design and installation of ITS equipment. from the infrastructure perspective. So which also relates closely to the connected vehicle space. And more recently, I've been involved in research activities that are related to automated vehicles. So again, maybe before we actually start the conversation, one of the things that I was thinking is that as a group, we probably should define or differentiate between automated vehicles and autonomous vehicles. Because there's always a lot of confusion when people say autonomous and when people say automated. So if we think we should probably define that up front before we actually get into the conversation, that might be good as well.
That'd probably be a good place to start. So I just want to ask the folks at the table just to introduce themselves and who they're with.
Mike Chevelle, I'm a research analyst at Cornerstone Capital. Andy Dang, I'm a research associate with Bank of Cornerstone.
Jillian with Agrion Grid Market.
Alex Jeter, I'm with Clinton Mobile Initiative. Tim Hoffman with Watts Capital, and also New York City Venture Director and National Board Member of Techopen, who's a nonprofit accelerator for
I'm Brian Cabezas, Program Manager for Agrion/Grid Market.
I'm Tessa Lee. I'm on the research team at the Carbon War Room.
I'm Nick Lally. I'm with EVBox. We do electric vehicle infrastructure deployment.
Russ Martell, I'm with the AIA New York.
Super. So, since you gave us a good opening, I'm going to start with you to tell us what you're doing in this space and also talk about the difference between, especially someone like me who gets it wrong all the time, the difference between automated and autonomous vehicles and what's going on. Why don't we start there and we'll walk around in terms of what each of us are doing.
Yeah, I don't think there's any right or wrong, it kind of depends on how people look at it. But in general, autonomous, from the very academic perspective, people like to put it in a way that the car is self-sufficient, the vehicle is actually self-sufficient, so it's not depending on infrastructure or other vehicles, vehicular data to navigate without a driver. When you're talking about automated vehicles, that's when you have different levels of automation, level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. And again, there is a possibility for an automated vehicle to be connected, as in, it actually takes data from the infrastructure as well as from other vehicles. So, that's the distinction between autonomous and automated. Automated could be connected and could be dependent on other vehicles and infrastructure, while autonomous is self-sufficient and it kind of limited to its sensing capability of the vehicle. So moving on to what we do, as Booz Allen does in this space, is that as a firm, we actually work in 3 different areas that relate to automation. So we do automated ground vehicles, aerial, and marine systems as well. And primarily our clients are the federal government, and we also have commercial clients in this space. And we offer a range of capabilities like R&D, rapid prototyping, testing and evaluation, and basic research on emerging technologies that would enable vehicle automation. Primarily right now we're focused on evaluating several connected vehicle applications from the mobility, environment, and safety perspectives. And with respect to automation, it's mainly on the research front right now.
Very cool. Thank you. So Camille, tell us what kind of studies you're involved in and the institute's involved in and that you're working on.
Like I mentioned, I'm from the University Transportation Research Center, a consortium of many universities, and we have a network of close to 400 faculty involved in different aspects of research in transportation, usually surface transportation. We're working mostly with our local agencies, like the state DOTs, some MTA, New York City Transit, and we're doing basic research on autonomous and vehicles. We're looking at policy implications, regulations, what type of legislation, how maybe our region over here, we're covering Region 2, New York, how New York should react to this technology that is coming, and providing a lot of policy advisement to the state DOTs. Also, it's going to change if you have autonomous vehicle, the infrastructure that DOT is laying out on the street, the traffic light, what should be the next traffic light, what should be the pavement, how to adapt to this. And most of the plan in transportation is we have a metropolitan transportation plan when it's implemented today is planned like 30 years in advance. So when you're trying to foresee to plan for 30 years, for 35 years, you have to have a better understanding what should be the future in that, to foresee what should be the future and plan for that. So we provide the advising to the planning organization to say, if you have autonomous vehicle, this what the technology that you expect, and also for a lot of regulation for the Department of Motor Vehicles, how that regulation has to be changed in order to adapt autonomous vehicle. So we're doing not just myself, but I have a lot of other colleagues. And also on the technology, we have colleagues from computer science look at the security of, because your vehicle is a cyberspace now, it's a computer. It's going to be subject to attack, how you protect it, the privacy, who has the data, the insurance. So at the university, we're trying to different aspects, legal aspect, insurance aspect, liability aspect, all those have, we touching on those ideas and trying to see how that's going to affect.
Super. So as the head of the country's largest municipal fleet, you have a lot of opportunity to test some neat gizmos and be involved in some real innovations. What kind of things is New York City doing? And for those not familiar, New York is really taking the lead on a lot of things in terms of savings of energy and utilization of the fleet. What kind of things is New York doing to advance autonomous vehicles?
Okay, so like I mentioned, as part of kind of this larger umbrella of Vision Zero, we've been tasked with a lot of things, retraining drivers and looking at different partnerships with the private sector. But one of the most interesting that's relevant here is taking a holistic look at the design of our fleet. And in the New York City space, when you talk about our fleet, you're talking about 100 different types and models of vehicles. There's about, we run pretty much every business from class 1 through 8 to off-road. There's not much that we aren't operating some small version of, or some large version of. We're the largest waste transporter and essentially garbage operator in the country. We have the largest fire department, the largest police departments, and then you kind of go on in there from running forestry businesses to asphalt businesses to beach operations to special event businesses. So we can test out a lot of things. There are a few things that we're doing, and so we start from an actual fleet that's got to work every day and operate every day. So there are kind of three things that we're doing. One, we are putting telematics in every single city vehicle. So part of the whole idea of autonomous is connected, and also connected to, potentially connected to each other, vehicle to vehicle, but certainly connected to GPS and to the larger kind of world. So that's not the case now. So we're making that the case. So we're putting AVL, automatic vehicle location, in every city vehicle. We're also establishing engine downloads in every single vehicle. So vehicles are computerized, as you mentioned, but on the fleet side, most of us have never seen that information. So yes, it's true, every time you click or don't click a seatbelt, that is an engine computer data point, but none of us have ever had access to that or been able to use it. So we are now in the process of, we're at 16,000 plus vehicles we install every night. We hope to be done the fleet by about 3 or 4 months. And so then you'll have all this data and connectivity. One of the interesting things just in a data management, we're over 1 billion records now in 6 months. Like, we don't even know what to do with all this stuff. Right? In theory, we can record every 2 seconds, but we can't handle 2 seconds of data on the city fleet. So we're actually up to 30 seconds, right? But there are issues when you do a crash investigation. 30 seconds isn't as great as 2. On the other hand, DoIT can't handle 2 seconds. We don't know where to put it. So that's one. Number 2 is we're looking at the physical design of vehicles. And this is, it's automated in a way, right? It's a transition. So, and the one that we're most kind of focused on at the moment is this story about side guards. So Mayor Blasio made an announcement a couple months ago about the city is going to kind of lead in the area of installing side guards on trucks. If you go to Europe or South America, for the last 20 years, every single truck that operates has been designed and mandated to have a side guard on the side of the truck, basically between the front and back wheels. so that if it's taking a right or left turn and you happen to be in that space, or a biker, or a motorcycle, or a child, you can't go under the tires, which constitutes about 10% of all fatalities in the country related to traffic. It's a basic, simple fix. Well, in Europe that's mandated, but when a manufacturer sells that truck in Europe, it has it. When they sell the same truck in America, they take it off. And you will, if you can find outside of our fleet, we're hoping you'll see some in our fleet, but if you can find a truck sidecar in this country, take a picture of it and send it to us. They're very rare, and we're kind of questioning that, and that's something on the design of vehicles, and we're doing other things on the physical design of vehicles. The third thing we're doing is going to kind of the technology, which is working with the major manufacturers. I'm not going to name them because they've all kind of given us presentations and asked us to hold that. But we're working with all the major national manufacturers on the topic of the top-end safety implementations and technologies they have. Things like corrective steering. And this is your bridge to automated vehicles, right? It's not going to be the autonomous, I'm going to call, if I need a car in 5 minutes, I may call Uber, but I'm not going to just call a car. There'll be a person there. But the bridge, we think, is going to be things like corrective steering, which exists now. Automated braking alerts and automated braking. So I drove a test vehicle last week that has fully automated braking. And so that you do the test. You drive fast into the car in front of you. It first flashes a big brake light, brake, and if you don't, it stops you. Right? So in our world, through other work we're doing on the Vision Zero side, this kind of reporting, we know that more than 50% of all our liability and payouts, which is $100 million a year on collision, so about $50 million plus dollars, is solely connected to city employees rear-ending other people. So that's where, that's a big lot. There's a $50 million agency that is called Rear Ends. And, it's funded more heavily than most city agencies. So that technology itself, that kind of introductory automated, I guess, as opposed to autonomous technology could impact that. And that's an available technology today. So we're really looking at how those technologies, and we think that'll be the bridge. Those technologies are going to be the bridge to this more autonomous, Google's going to run a truck, the car will drive itself kind of place. And then just the one other thing that I'll mention as part of that, we're also, and if you have any role in this, trying to nudge vehicle manufacturers to separate safety from luxury and trim in how they sell vehicles. Now we're pushing on the fleet side, and if you know the auto industry, fleet is a very different kind of part of the market than retail. And there are financial impacts to what but if you think about retail now, if you want the top of the end safety package, you get the top of the end luxury package, right? You get the plush seats and the sky window and everything else that comes as a luxury car. Safety and luxury are now, for market purposes, tied. We're trying to see if we can help push a separation of that so that people can get the highest end safety for their car that's available without necessarily having to buy a luxury car. We probably have more opportunity to do that in the fleet side that operates a little bit differently in terms of the marketplace. There are probably different pressures on retail, but we think that's an important kind of step as well.
So let's talk about some of the roles of things that help move this forward. One of those obviously is the government, particularly the federal government and the state governments. As Brian mentioned in the materials he put out for the project, there's only 4 states that have licensed these type of vehicles. The European Union's way ahead of us here. They've actually convened a Robotic Law Institute to look at all forms of robotic type devices and what type of things are involved and what type of regulatory changes are required. It largely concluded that government should stay out of the way. Here in our country, we've gone from the government sort of inventing through the Defense Department and universities the internet to now deciding to regulate the internet as a utility, which some people think is a disaster and other people think is wonderful. So what sort of role do you see would you like to see the federal government and the state government take as advocates or in this regard?
Well,
everyone. I'm going to ask all of you.
I mean, certainly, it's not the same level of automation that is kind of the vision of this meeting. But I'll tell you, in something a little more basic as a technology of sideguards, we've actually partnered with the Volpe Center at USDOT on this project. They did the public report that we issued with us, and they have been a tremendously helpful bridge to NHTSA and to NTSB on the larger potential policy issues. And there are some, even within the city fleet, some people have been concerned about, should we lead on this when there is not a federal standard? Does it put us at a risk? If everyone kind of looks at the guard and says, yeah, it's going to protect a pedestrian bicyclist. What if it's a truck-to-truck collision, right? And then there's some impact we didn't understand, and there is no federal standard for them. Then are we putting ourselves at risk? So, certainly in this kind of innovation, it's actually been very helpful to have the role of Volpe, and they've been communicating with NHTSA on this, and very helpful in alleviating some of those concerns. Certainly, when you talk to larger automation and connectivity, there's so much of a risk aspect to this that and there's so many different car models and make models and traffic conditions, and you're going to have federal engagement, in my own opinion, if you're going to get those out on the road. And remember, of course, every state, at the state government level, they're all licensing vehicles, so you're not there would certainly is going to be a limiter if you don't have kind of state and federal government involvement as to what you're being allowed to do.
I would like to second Keith. Actually, the federal government, played a role. Otherwise, it's going to be the Wild West. Okay, if you just leave to manufacturers, standardization is a big issue. Every manufacturer is going to own standard. Like we were talking a little bit earlier, Google push autonomous vehicle with their own standard, and they want to be the one controlling what should be the technology of autonomous vehicle. And a lot of companies are developing their own vehicle, their own autonomous. Let's say I have my vehicle that can communicate with my environment and it doesn't detect other vehicles. There's no standard, that can be really a big issue. Maybe instead of saving, we're trying to reduce an accident, maybe you're creating more a chaos, on the roadways. So the federal government should play the role into developing those standards and make sure that whatever is on the roadway are actually certified. So there's issue about certification. Who certify those technologies? That's a big issue. A lot of companies are developing technology. They're doing their own tests and they can put that on the market, but there's no certification. Okay. There'll be also a lot of the government play the role into legislation also. They have to have regulations, how those going to be operated, because, we're moving from, we say, automatic connected vehicle. If it become autonomous, it's going to take years. It's not tomorrow. It's going to be stage by stage. But how you develop those regulations to put the rules that you need a driver, you need human behind the wheels, just in case it go array, to intervene on those vehicles. So who's going to set those rules? That's where the government can intervene. And there's a big issue also on liability, like I mentioned, insurance, accident. If it happens, who's liable? It's the manufacturer. And most of the vehicle, you have second market where you have a regular vehicle who develop a vehicle, but the autonomous is not by the original company. It can be a third company who install the autonomous technology on the vehicle. Who's liable for that? Is the original manufacturer or the... So those issues have to be sought out. And it's still not yet clear, so the government can play a big role into pushing the technology a little bit and make sure that...
One of the roles related to that is, well, for example, all of us have driver's license, we have individual licenses, but cars are mostly owned by fleets or by companies. So if you have autonomous cars that are owned by companies that you can't track an individual down to, and an autonomous car has an accident, who's responsible if you can't find the owner of a corporation? So are we going to get to a point where the law is going to change so that vehicles have to be personally licensed the way people are, licenses are?
Well, even in an automated braking situation, right, which we define as 50% of every collision we have that leads to injury, All right, so if a brake fails in a car, then it's not and you can tie it to a manufacturer issue, then you have a manufacturer liability. Otherwise, it could be a maintenance issue or it's the driver issue. Now, if you have an automated braking system in your car and it is supposed to stop your car for you, then is the car manufacturer dealer responsible for every rear-end collision? Does the $50 million of liability transfer over to the car dealers and to their insurance? Since irrespective of what I did as a driver, I bought this car to stop me. So I mean I think that's where you'll see the real question develop in a very with a known technology that's being rolled out now, before you might get to
And I agree with both Camille and Keith. And I can think of three things when it comes to the federal government or the state governments. And there's still a lot of unknown in this space. We still need to understand a lot of things before we actually get to the next step. And one of the first steps would be to kind of research and understand how these systems will kind of change the way transportation happens. It could be design from the infrastructure perspective. It could be traffic signal changes, timing changes, and so on and so forth. The second aspect would be that this research actually feeds into the policy and regulation perspectives. So, for example, when you're talking about who's liable for the car doesn't break, so if the manufacturer is solely liable, again, the manufacturers will be hesitant in putting these systems forward. So that's going to be a roadblock for these automated systems or applications to come to the environment or to the public, right? So how can we actually lift this roadblock and actually help these systems to actually come on board? And that's where the liability aspect comes in play. And probably we need more discussion and research and analysis to that. And part of the problem is also that it's very difficult to test these systems on a long term. We want these systems to be fail-proof for let's say 15 years. I'm just giving you a number out there. But how would you test the system to say that it's going to actually function for that long? You can't really test it for 15 years and then say, well, yeah, it works. So there should be like different techniques to test these systems in order to be able to give that confidence and say, well, these are going to be working fine. And the last thing that I can think of is technology itself. It's growing and advancing so fast that, coming back to Camille's point of long-range planning, it becomes really hard to actually plan for the future because the technology is changing so fast. So especially when you're talking about autonomous vehicles, again, that's also going to be very tricky in order to kind of put specific plans for adoption and implementation. So it's a very dynamic environment, and I think that's where the federal government would...
Does it also call for the federal government to get more involved? Because if you're folks like some of the capital companies that you work here, you don't want to invest in Beta when VHS is going to be the winner. And if you have some of these technologies are changing, is there a fear in the investment community that they're not sure which horse to ride, to use a very bad pun, or similarly for cars? Is there a funding role then that you see for these federal government to deal with some of these issues?
Mainly from the research perspective, and the standards and certifications is where when it will come into play, is to help these private entities or research entities to collaborate with each other. I think that's where, if everybody's independently doing their own things, then it's not going to all mesh up at the end. So I think, where it is to bring all these different entities together to collaborate and bring about systems which would help with the adoption.
So let's talk about what each of you has sort of hinted at a bit, but the real sort of issue here in terms of the behavior of the driver. And so you mentioned about the self-braking, and I mentioned the story of my eldest. As soon as he comes home, he gets in our Honda CR-V, he turns off the eco button because he thinks it slows him down. So if I have a car that is going to stop me, am I going to be like the bank that's too big to fail? I'm going to take risky bets. So am I going to drive faster knowing the brakes are going to protect me? The whole issue of moral hazard that these entities, these devices were in. So how are we going to go about, changing the American driver? The American driver and the freedom of the American driver is such a part of our culture. How do we, and you mentioned that you're involved in programs to retrain your drivers. So How do we deal with that aspect?
I guess I'm going to start it. It's a good question. If you look now, we have a lot of advance in our car now. Okay, I'm sure when you're driving, you're driving 65, 50 miles per hour. You depend a lot on the car. That the car going to react when you're going to press the brake. You expect the car to brake. So the speed have increased because due to the good advance. So if you have autonomous vehicle, so it seems like the driver is out of the questions because we noted that 90% of the accident usually human driven. It's a human behavior. Usually it's caused by humans. So that's the way to reduce the accident. You say if you have a self-driving vehicle, you cut that level really dramatically. So as a driver, or if it's autonomous, you're not getting, you're not supposed to be intervening in your car. Your car going to.
I mean, I could just see the teenagers getting into that car and saying, "Well, I got self-drive, I got self-brake, so I only have to worry about that accelerator."
But that's where, that's actually the end game. So you don't have to do any action. Right. That's the end game. But it takes time. The research still have to be done. We're not at that point yet. So we're going stage by stage by implementing all the technology to support it. But the end game of autonomous, if it's really self-sufficient, that will be the end game that you don't have to do anything. So there will be tests, like we're talking about. There will be failure because it's all mechanic. There will be how you recognize this hypothetical issue that you have you have an object with a brake, so the car detected object, the brake goes, or usually the car swerves to avoid the brake. But what about the occupant? If the object is a dog or a cat or the human being, the research is not good enough to recognize, to make the difference between the human and an animal. So how many people is the occupant in the car? So who are you going to sacrifice? Kill whatever that obstacle or put your occupant in danger. So all these aspects still have to be resolved. That's where the dilemma, comes.
Yeah.
But
well, in New York City, we have automated transportation and have for decades. It's called public transportation. So and people like to drive. I mean, I actually don't think that. I think we'll be all sitting here in 30 years and people will be driving their own cars. We say technology moves really quickly, and so go into the sustainable side. Electric car, hybrid car technology moves really quickly. I've been very happy and proud to be part of that implementation. Yet most people, meaning 95% plus, do not have a hybrid car, do not have an electric car, and have no plans of getting one. So, I think, the idea of this happening so fast that it's going to overwhelm us. First off, people like to drive. So, there's a question of customer demand for, losing control. I actually like to drive. So I would love to have, a top-of-shelf car that has this kind of like automated safety protection. On the other hand, I want to drive my own car. And most people, car driving is a culture. And I think most people, if actually presented with the technology in 10 years, would drive the car for you, would reject it. And they would test with their interest in automobiles at some level. But also, there's just a huge culture change at every level that would have to take place. So I'll just give you a simple story. In our early telematics experiment, and don't quote me on this, but it's true. So we're lighting up cars and we get all this engine information. And so we've had a long-standing policy. It's called the seatbelt law. And we now know analytically that a huge percentage of our operators don't apply it. So is your automated car going to force the seatbelt on them? Because we know even if we can remind them and alert them, which we already can, they just don't do it. So there's a huge culture change. And then even for a driver who's interested, I have driven these kind of automated safety cars. It is actually you really have to get used to it. And remember, right now, the technology allows the driver to override the protections. So the car will start stopping, but I can override that as a driver. If I accelerate, if I decide, no, I'm road raging, I'm hitting you, it will let me do that. It won't. It'll try to stop me, but right now, at least the technology will not definitively stop me. It'll. Same with steering, and the steering kind of has to. You have the protective, corrective steering, but the car doesn't at this point know the circumstances of in the environment well enough to know if you're steering away from an accident or steering out of your lane. You have to have things like lane markings, right? A lot of the automated technologies depend on you having proper lane markings and being able to read the lane markings. So what happens when you're driving in a salted environment in the winter? I know when I drive the highways, and I go to Boston a lot, I can't see anything all winter, and so your car technology is not going to be able to see it either. So I think there's going to be plenty of time to bridge this, but there is a huge aspect which is going to go to both the motivations and the habits of people who drive vehicles on the private side and the fleet side.
Yeah, definitely. And thinking about how drivers react to these technologies. Again, you got to segregate the population into different types, because probably in about 2 or 3 months ago, I saw a survey which kind of looked at different classes or different age groups in the population, asking people how many of them actually like to drive, and most of the younger population was like, I don't care if I drive or not. I want to get on my Facebook and Twitter, kind of tell people where I am, where I'm heading to, and things like that. So they don't really care about driving. But I mean, I personally like to drive. It kind of calms me down, especially if there's no traffic and stuff like that. So again, there are different categories of people that want different things. So again, we got to kind of think about that aspect also. So there will be, as the population, the younger population starts driving, they might want more automated features or autonomous modes, so they don't have to really worry about driving in city traffic and things like that. When it comes to things, what Dan mentioned earlier is, what if people start thinking, well, the car is going to do everything for me, so I don't really care about the accelerator. That's where disclaimers come from the manufacturers and standards come, which we say, well, if you drive more than 60 miles an hour, the system is not going to work, or it's not going to protect you. So those kind of things to kind of educate people to say what the limitations of the technology are. I think that will also help people, and that's where training and licensing comes into picture, to help educate people that, so that they can use the technology in the right way. Because there's also been studies about how people actually misuse these automated features sometimes. There's an application which actually needs the driver to have hands on the wheel all the time. And there were pictures and videos on YouTube which actually had a soda can, taped to the steering wheel to essentially kind of trick the system. So those kind of misuse strategies, again, we have to be careful about, and that's where education can actually, training, licensing can really help.
Unlike Homer Simpson pressing the autopilot on Ned Flanders' RV and then going in the back to get a cup of coffee, or a beer, actually.
That's why those different levels of automation can be confusing. When you're talking about level 2, level 3, the driver really does not know when he or she needs to take over, right? It's like, well, the car is taking over, I'm taking a nap, and then the car suddenly says, well, you got to take over. So then how is my reaction time going to change? If I'm actively driving, my reaction time could be 2 seconds. Now if I'm doing something else and then I suddenly take over the wheel, my reaction time could be 3 to 4 seconds, which could be significant, when you're talking about an automobile function.
It also goes to skill, and we already have this, right? So I'm as guilty. We were talking about it earlier. We have a form of automation that's now pretty much getting saturation. It's called GPS, right? It's the Garmin unit. And I'm as guilty as anyone. I am completely Garmin dependent at this point. I often don't even know what road I'm on. I don't care what road I'm on. It tells me where to go. And we were joking about it, but the biggest now existential crisis is when that thing stops working. Then you're like, oh, wow, I have no idea where I am now. I'm totally lost. I'm confused. I'm in danger. Help me. I got to go to the side of the road and wait for Garmin to refresh. Because I have no idea what road I'm on. I don't know where I'm going.
I just maybe down
I was
before
telling
you
Keith the
finish.
story that my phone died when I was walking through Copenhagen, and didn't buy a map because I had my phone. So.
just to mention, that's why it's good when Sue doesn't mention about automated and autonomous. I still want to be, because I guess there's the manufacturer, like BMW, Mercedes, Honda, other stuff. It's automated vehicles that they have. They're adapting the technology. But we have other players like Google. They're not going to automatic vehicle. Apple doesn't want to go to automatic vehicle. They want to go directly to autonomous vehicles. So there's that leap. So everything, all the technology is at the vehicle level, and let the vehicle replicate the human. So the vehicle is going to do like you, the driver, know how you drive and drive like you driving. So that's the two aspects. So I was talking a little bit more about if it's autonomous. Looking at the title of the topic to say it's autonomous, that means everything is self in the vehicle, and the vehicle is intelligent enough to drive like a human being. Okay, so those are the two. This one is still automated. It's not really autonomous. It's at the federal level to get to autonomous total. So they're going through different stage. But Google is not following those stage, kind of. Right. They want to do a leap directly to autonomous self-driving vehicles. So just to make sure that to clarify that.
Let's open it up to the group. Let's start. Go ahead.
Wait for this question. To kind of draw into everything, we talked about the culture of drivers. We talked about the liability side of it. What sort, assuming that for a while we're going to have cars with drivers and someday driverless cars on the road, what sort of infrastructure do we have to stay in harmony?
Well, all right, so of course it depends on what the technology that ultimately rolls that out is, all right, but I'll just throw out a lot of things. One, you're going to have, assuming it's GPS dependent, then you're going to have backup systems and some kind of redundancy in your GPS. So in my Garmin example, my Garmin goes off all the time. All right, so if my Garmin's part of now the system that actually drives my car, and I'm in the back seat reading a book, then that can't fail. So currently that fails all the time. It can't. So you're going to have forms of redundancy if it's GPS dependent, which of course it's going to be. You're going to have physical infrastructure, and again, things like lane markings. I know a lot of the kind of automated technologies depend on things like reliable lane markings, which don't exist all over the place. What is the impact on things like having potholes? Will they be able to identify potholes and avoid them in the same manner? You're going to have to be able to deal with weather conditions and be able to operate through all types of weather conditions. And especially, as you go forward, that you're going to lose driver skills. If you really do that, some percentage of people who are going to be on the road are not going to have the skills or capacities or even be in position to take control of the car. So I think, those are just a few items, but I think there are a lot more.
Yeah, Keith is correct. And also driving in the freeway and driving in the urban environment, totally different. So those are the issues that, if you're in urban environment, you deal with more issue compared to the freeways. So people think that the first adoption will be on freeways because the urban environment is a little bit more complicated. What should be your signals? We have automated, like you have senior priority for usually emergency vehicle. Other stuff, the vehicle have to be detected if it's green, it's red, hidden spot. See if someone's disconnected and notice that the other guy, driver won't going to try to bypass the red lights, won't stop. So you need, that's why we have the vehicle to infrastructure communication. So the vehicle be able to read the infrastructure through the sensor and know, what the signal is, and so there's a lot of change that's going to happen. And the big one that you mentioned, the lane markings, that's a big one, and that actually the DOT have to know. You have to develop those lane markings that can be easily readable by the technology that you have by the cameras. Maybe the type of paint going to be different from whatever you use now, and the weather is a big issue. Actually, we DOT have a Connected Vehicle Deployment Program grant that was just closed a few weeks ago. We actually submitted one proposal to test a lot of those applications in New York. And one of the applications that we really want to test is how those technologies perform in snow in really adverse weather. So.
Right. And yeah, I mean that's a really loaded question. There's so many unknowns at this stage, and you're talking about a mixed environment where you have legacy vehicles and then you have autonomous and automated vehicles. Well, let me put autonomous vehicles away, but automated vehicles. So again, I can see two classifications. So when you're looking at urban environments, as Camille said, and then the rural environment, and I would expect more deployments on the urban side as opposed to rural side, because you don't really need as much infrastructure support for these automated systems on a rural roadway. But from the urban perspective, there's a lot that the infrastructure can offer to these automated applications and systems. Take a simple urban complex intersection. If you have certain technologies, say for example surround or stereo cameras that can give you a holistic view of the intersection, that can actually help vehicles actually prevent collisions, intersection collision avoidance systems, where a vehicle cannot see a pedestrian or a cyclist that's coming from the perpendicular street, but the infrastructure can detect that person or vehicle and pass on the message to the vehicle that's coming to the intersection, and that way prevent collisions. Again, from the infrastructure side, road weather is very important, and if the infrastructure can provide that input to the automated vehicles, again, that can be a big benefit in improving safety and adverse weather conditions. In the rural side, you take an automated vehicle. Recently I looked at an application that can actually help autonomous vehicles, kind of negotiate a work zone. So the vehicle or the application detects traffic signs, the speed limit and then the work zone, and it can detect what the start and end of the work zone are, and it will automatically adjust its speed when it's going through the work zone. So again, there's a lot of things that you can do on that side, where possibly putting QR codes on traffic signs, which can help these vehicles better accurately detect what that sign means. Today vision systems are not accurate enough to detect certain signs that are out there. So maybe a QR code would make it easier for these systems to actually understand what's the rule or the speed limit or whatever, and then adjusts its speed based on that.
So a lot of this infrastructure would also be built in. I remember driving from the Manchester airport into the city of Manchester, and the cab driver kept slowing down. And we asked him, I said, why are you slowing down occasionally? He said, well, there's speed cameras. Mm-hmm. But the GPS on his car knew where all the speed cameras were. Right. So so he would slow down when he got to a speed camera. But that's the type of thing you're talking about. The GPS systems, in effect, would be a lot more data rich in terms of the things that they would know and be
right.
able to evaluate as part of the systems.
Yeah, there's so many things that the infrastructure can offer to automated vehicle systems, in terms of redundancy. You have an automated application that kind of uses the sensors in a vehicle to do certain things, but it can always be supported by data from the infrastructure side. So there's a lot of research to be done in that aspect. Again, GPS navigation, positioning, and so on. Corrections from infrastructure-based devices can actually help accuracy of positioning that vehicle. So, for example, traveling in a tunnel, you don't have GPS connection over there. So how can maybe infrastructure devices inside the tunnel help the vehicle know exactly where it is inside the tunnel? Those kind of things. So it's again very, very broad.
And just one more chapter. All right. So yesterday, we've been training literally tens of thousands of people in safety driving. I audited one of my trainers' courses yesterday, and so just talking about the self-driving car just as a concept. So one of the things that they train you is, all right, if you go to a red light, if you see a red light, a flashing red light, a stop sign, or a police officer, who rules in a traffic situation?
Police officer.
The police officer. All right, so how is the autonomous vehicle communicating with the human being police officer in a live traffic situation where all the other automated systems are actually not to be adhered to, and you have to actually be
Right.
watching a person? So how's your automated car going to know that there's a police officer telling you to ignore the red light, ignore the markings, ignore everything and do this? So, just as an interesting challenge, right? I mean, I was just thinking
That's a very good point. And there are applications that do gesture control. Yeah.
Do you want to be in that car?
Yeah,
The gesture control
but
system
it's,
didn't work.
those
Well,
issues.
He thought it was this. It was actually that.
Those situational issues gonna happen, but that's why we depend about doing a lot of research.
Right.
If you want to do the research, and then all gonna be software.
And coming up with those
Looking
standards.
and come up
right?
those kind
But
of,
it's just,
it's
defending a
startup.
car because it was a foreign car that
Yeah.
interpreted the gestures in a different
Yeah.
way.
It shouldn't just listen to some random person, but it should really identify that person is an officer. So the officer should have reflective, vests or something like that the vehicle can actually differentiate between some random person trying to give directions. As
But then
opposed
you
to-
just
homeless guy.
right, yeah, just coming
Right,
in
right.
and waving his hands and and so on.
then you're just recognizing that
There's a lot of
it's not
challenges.
right. So
Right.
last night I was watching something about the marathon bombings, and they were talking about how they used facial identification technology. And the complete difference between facial identification technology in the movies, where it all seems so perfect, and in real life, where it's extremely limited, right?
Right.
So now you're talking about the car in an immediate situation, maybe in a bad weather situation, is going to recognize the person and read all these signals, and then I'm like,
Right,
I'm not while I'm working for this.
Exactly.
Go ahead, yes.
So, I've heard people from Google and whatnot. Now they probably have, they're motivated to say this, but that at least in certain areas, particularly maybe 405 in California, that they're predicting you could see completely autonomous vehicles within a decade, which there seems to be a rather large disconnect. And so I guess my question is, I know it's not black and white, but is the challenge to this more on the technology side, in your opinion, or the regulatory side, or is it sort of just a mix of both? Maybe once the technology's there, the regulatory environment will quickly follow, or but just a little more clarity on that, because it sounds, like you made a comment, we won't see this in 30 years. So where's the disagreement here?
I would think it's both. Technology is again advancing, and you're going to see, but I don't think that's going to be a roadblock. Essentially, it could be in certain aspects, but I would think policy and regulatory aspects would probably be a roadblock up front. To answer your question in short.
I will agree that it's both. Technologically, we don't have the solution. Just one example, talking about the police officer regulating. The technology is not there yet. It's not ready yet. But we always believe that technologically, it's going to improve, and it's going to. The institution, the regulation, is lack a little bit more behind. So they try to adapt to the technology. We are not talking about autonomous vehicles few years from now. So all our, you're driving in New York State, the regulation to drive, you have to have your two hands on your, one hand on the power steering. Now, if you don't have to have it because the technology allows you not to have it. So all that has to be adapted. They'll be autonomous how you license those vehicles. So that's going to come. So usually it's delay in New York. That's why, I'm doing a lot of conference, pushing that, working with GOT and GMV over here, have to adapt because they want to attract companies to come and do the testing. So at this phase now, it's a lot about testing. There's really nothing out there that is deployable that you can have out there. We all in the testing phase, research phase. So everything is under research. So you have to keep that on perspective. Nothing is there to be deployed. It's all testing, because there's still a lot of unknown.
I took a civil service test, so I will differ with Google. So 20% of the city fleet that we own today will be around in 10 years. So I'm pretty confident, unless you're going to change out all the vehicles in a new schedule, most vehicles last longer than 10 vehicles, so 10 years. So it's not going to be different. So people, I'm planning on keeping my little Honda Accord for at least 10 years just to make back the money on it. And again, look, it's all fascinating, right? And it's great stuff. And I think these technologies do exist now. And what we're trying to do is see these technologies get on vehicles, right? So I think steering control and lane control and automated braking are existing technologies, and we're really focused on is getting those on as large a percentage of vehicles now, so that people can get used to them, and so they can provide very specific and real and great benefits, and be a bridge to this kind of more, exciting but seemingly, at least in my opinion, more distant future. So I think there are technologies that exist today in this automated realm that can do tremendous good and be a bridge. And so I suspect we're going to focus on getting so right now none of our vehicles have them, right? So it would take us 10 years to just get these existing technologies into the trucks we have now. So and we've got a goal of just to lead on side guards. We have a time kind of goal in our heads, and it's years. To get the diesel particulate filters, which are really great federal policy, on trucks. We started that in 2005, and our goal is to finish by 2017. So that's an existing technology, just the tailpipe technology, newer retrofit, 12 years just for that implementation. That is not, it's great technology environmentally, but it's not the same as saying the car's going to drive me to work. So, I think there's a lot of work to be done in between.
And from Google's perspective, I think they have probably 5 to 10% of their employees actually using automated, autonomous systems on campus. So maybe that person will go up, but again, going back to Keith's point, actually having that on 4 or 5 on the state freeway might not happen. But the percentage of autonomous vehicles in Google campus might go up. Maybe everybody will be using one to get around.
To what extent, if we change the sort of rules of the road, does this potential for this vehicle go up? For example, we now have bike lanes. We could have electric vehicle lanes or some autonomous vehicle lanes, and in an urban area, and it'd be perfectly safe, and all the problems that we've alluded to would go away, most of them.
Well,
Yeah.
most fatalities in New York City in traffic take place in left and right-hand turns, and even if you actually could find another dedicated lane, and that won't happen in 10 years, I can assure you. Most of your fatalities would depend on turns, and turns are where the automated system would interact with everybody else. So even if you could dedicate the lane, which I think there's just a question about how to do that, you wouldn't necessarily impact some of the safety issues.
Yeah, dedicating the lane, usually we don't have the real estate, we don't have, there's no road, the hard way, hard of way to dedicate the lane. And the technology they're trying to merge, they start in the beginning, actually, with they call it the automatic highway system. And it was tested. That was almost 20 years ago in San Diego. That was where DOT was going, but they figured that it was not really a feasible way to solve this. So you want to be able to use the existing infrastructure already instead of developing another dedicated infrastructure for doing this technology. So they want to use the existing one.
So that go to what you said earlier, that the most likely where these would first happen is on the interstates.
Yeah,
where you could dedicate a lane, or you could have one lane where the infrastructure was put in.
For now, they're not really dedicating the lane, so it's merged with the traffic. The technology is good enough that the test that you can on freeway you can drive meter mile if you don't have all the intention. The car can follow another car.
Well,
but it doesn't have to be. If you're dedicating, it costs more money. We don't have the $1 billion to just instrument into those lanes for that and for that purpose. And the market penetration also is not that high. So it's like the same as HOV lane that were closed because you have HOV lane. If it's not used, we have congestion to the general roadways, and why you have in that lane that is not used, because the market penetration is not that high. How many people actually have that technology?
It also gets back to
Cars.
questions of behavior again too. I remember I was living out west when they introduced high volume, high occupancy only lanes in the California highways, which led to a massive increase in the sales of blow up dolls.
Mhm.
And people put under the seat next to them to try to
Next
fool the
to-
cops.
yes.
So, Tim, and then this young
Now
lady.
the blow-up doll will actually be driving.
Yeah.
So, Tim, and then the young lady.
On cybersecurity, what's being done, what needs to be done, because I mean, you hear every day about bank records and credit card records being hacked into. I can envision a scenario where a hacker steals a car.
Yes.
They hack into the system and have it sent to their chop shop. Alternatively, I've heard scenarios where kind of an interim step along the way here is you're at the mall and you want the car to pick you up. It's raining and you park the car somewhere and you want the car to come pick you up. So you press a button, it comes, but so that hacker can hack into that and not pick you up, steal the car, do damage to the parking lot. So what's being done for cybersecurity? What needs to be done?
Like, still a lot of research. Actually, in our proposal to US DOT, that's one aspect that's going to be looked at. First is the hacking, also the privacy is a big issue also. The data, wherever you go, you want that to stay into your RIM. So, it's, like I said, it's a big issue. It's all recognized. It's a really big issue, and a lot of research is still being done. GOT, nobody have the answer into it for now. So it's on, it's still on the research and trying to find how you can have a robust system that can be, because for now, even the technology, we have a lot of keyless cars. We found out that the system, I was talking to people develop it, is really open. A hacker can really tap into, open your car easily. And the device, people can have, easy device that open all the car just by walking by the cars. So security for most of the car manufacturers was not a big issue for now. We have a lot of electronic in our cars, but they seem like they're not really secure that much. It's open. And by having these technologies coming, now they pay attention to security. But it was not really the first major attention, but now they have to pay attention to security.
So just a couple of points on his comment on dedicated lanes before I jump on cybersecurity. Is one of the problems I see is equity issues. How is it okay to use taxpayers' dollars to actually dedicate a lane for autonomous vehicles, for just autonomous vehicles, right? You can easily convert the existing HOVs to say, this is a dedicated lane for autonomous vehicles, but again, there's going to be a lot of equity questions raised from that perspective, from the public perspective. And in long term, when penetration increases of these systems, then you can actually, make a single lane 2 lanes, because these automated systems or autonomous vehicles can actually, they don't need as much space, so you can actually, increase capacity that way. So those are the 2 thoughts that I had there. In terms of cybersecurity, Booz Allen actually does a lot of work in that area, and that's one of our strengths. And there's still a lot of issues with respect to cybersecurity. Privacy, I don't know if privacy is really that much of an issue. I know people are concerned about it, but you can be tracked even if you're not in a car. You can be tracked anywhere in today's world, so I don't know if people really understand that aspect of it. But again, taking control of the car is something that I know that the feds of the DOT, everybody is concerned about. And they are looking into systems where they can make all these systems safer. They're looking at different encryption technologies, different PKI systems, public key infrastructure systems, which can actually protect the data that's being transmitted by these cars. From the infrastructure to the vehicle, or from the vehicle to other vehicles, and they're also working on certificates where to kind of authenticate the data that's being sent to the car, or sent from the car to other vehicles. So if it has the valid certificate, then you can trust that data. Otherwise, you cannot trust that data. But it still remains an issue. Yes.
Hackers have done it with ships, actually. They send ships off course and like reprogram it there. On the dedicated lanes, a comment and then a question. I do think that we're seeing potential for that on the highways with cargo freight with trucks. So doing like a road train, and then you have, the trucks have this very advanced platooning technology where they're going 80 miles an hour, 50 feet from each other, basically automated, and they can separate out when they exit and leave the lane and each be individually driven, but in the meantime, the driver in the back can be doing other work, sleeping, etc. And that would also help with some safety generally on the highway. So we're actually looking at, how we can start some pilot programs for dedicated lanes with highly automated trucks. And then my question was, we've talked about kind of things the distance that we have to go on technology and infrastructure and regulation, but where do you see the potential, or if it's really secondary, of kind of new business models? I'm not sure where I stand on it, but a lot of my colleagues think that we're going to have road transportation almost like as you would shoot a taxi or an airplane. So the ownership model is totally different, which reapportions the risk and the responsibility and some of the regulation if there's just a private company that offers a ride as an asset in its automated vehicles, and kind of just a whole new business models of car ownership and transportation. Is that so far out?
Actually, yeah, I heard a lot of story about that, and especially when we see the case of Uber. So the car ownership is going to be a big difference. I have a colleague who say, now you have, when you use elevator, it's a vertical transportation. So the car is going to be your horizontal elevator. So you're going to call the car, you have it, why you want to own it. You don't own the elevator unless you're healthy at the building, you have your private elevator. So those people who own the car, it's going to cost them more to own the car. It's like when you fly, you can charter if you have money, or you just purchase the seat in the plane and to travel. So they see the car the same way. So if you have autonomous cars, a lot of companies going to own those cars, and through your app, you can call the car and get a ride wherever you go, and leave the car, and the car can serve, other purpose. So that's futurists say that will be in the future. It's going to be,
I guess I'm wondering kind of where we see the first dominoes falling. Like, does it need to be the technology, or would a new business model, like, what's the major, block?
Well, car share is here, right?
Sure.
So, and we're very robust in car share, and actually car share is an early example of some of how the issues on security play out. So if you think about the Zipcar model, and the city of New York actually adopts car share through Zipcar. So in theory, we have a technology now in place where you can't drive the car, but you could open the doors and start the car, and you could take the car. If you could hack our car share system right now, I suppose you could open up the doors, and start the ignition and take the car. So we do have that connectivity at the car share level. It won't drive the car for you, but it can get you the car. And we haven't had, fortunately, that issue. So the security issues have not transpired. What has actually interestingly transpired, though, as we see this, as we merge vehicle technologies and IT technologies, is we did have once a disruption with our car share system, which then meant you couldn't use 600 cars. So now an IT disruption, as we all have learned with computers, right? A network disruption means you can't work anymore because all your work is, it doesn't matter if I'm at my desk, computer, I'm not doing anything. That actually, as you bring the IT technologies into your transport sector, that means the same type of disruption can take place. So we've had it very momentary, by the way. It wasn't a security related issue. It was an IT disruption issue. Actually, it was an error that someone made in our very specific system. But it was kind of an interesting window into, oh Lord, now an IT disruption means you can't drive. But certainly car share technology is, Uber, the kind of Zipcar model, the car share, and I think, even with all the movements in car share now, the fact is the majority of cars, including my own, don't go anywhere most of the time. So I think there's enormous additional potential in the sharing side of cars, and it's a version of what's happening with real estate and people trying to kind of sell out, their free time in their houses and apartments. But most of our cars don't move. I know mine. I have a car. You need it, but most hours it's sitting.
Mostly drive mine for opposite side parking.
Right. You got from New York, right?
Think about,
we mostly drive.
Think about
it
what
for
New York would be like when all the cars are automated in 7 a.m. every morning.
weekends and moving our kids on bad weather. That's when we use our car. So most of the working hour that just sits, and that's most cars, right? Our parking lot's never empty. So I think there's enormous opportunity there, and that could, and certainly fleets would be well positioned to adopt private and public, well, especially private fleets would be well positioned to adopt these kind of technologies because they're used to kind of integrated systems and common operating models, as opposed to every individual out there, who likes doing their own thing and having their own type of car.
And let's say we figured it all out. We figured all the kinks out, and everything is running perfect. So in that case, I could see actually several people owning an autonomous vehicle. Essentially sharing a vehicle. So ownership could go down, or I could get an autonomous vehicle and send it to work. As a taxi. So I use a vehicle, but then I let it go, pick people from one place to another, and actually make money out of it also. So that's just two thoughts that I had on that perspective.
It seems like a lot of the software stuff is way ahead. We have the car sharing. We have apps that'll help you find an empty parking spot. We have an app that'll help you find a car charger. It seems like a lot of those type of software applications, and of course GPS is part of that, just in terms of efficiency. Applications are ahead of the technology of actual taking over the driving from us. So I think, let's wrap this up. I'm going to ask you all to pontificate and tell us what you think should happen over the next 15, 20 years. Keith has mentioned that we are still a long way away from cars that are driving themselves. Hopefully before my license gets taken away from me, I'll have that option. But let's start with you. Where do you see this industry in 15, 20, 25 years and how it moves forward?
That's a very interesting question. I would really like to fantasize where we'll be in 15 years, but it's going to be really difficult to predict what's going to happen, and a lot actually depends on policy and regulation. There can be a lot of the technology exists today, and we've seen it. We've seen cars actually drive themselves, parks itself, and so on. But I think maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, I can actually see some of these being adopted, at least in say for example university campuses, parks, where it's a controlled environment, right? So it's a lot easier to actually deploy these systems and have people actually increase people's confidence in these systems, so that would actually make it easier for people to actually say, well, okay, these systems seem to be working fine, and we can actually bring it to our streets. That's critical again, where public perception plays. Will people be ready to adopt these strategies? And I think that will also kind of dictate how fast these systems come into reality. But to start with, I think fleet companies, fleet operations, university campuses, and parks will probably be the early adopters of this technology, along with electric vehicles. We've all actually seen. I think there's actually a project going on in Japan or South Korea. I think they have one of their parks is actually using autonomous electric vehicles to kind of ferry people around in the park, and it's working fine.
Got me from the airport to the train the other day, right? There's no drivers on the air train.
Yeah.
How about yourselves? What do you think?
I guess there's still a lot of challenge, but automotive vehicle actually propose a lot of solutions for the challenge that we have today, especially in terms of safety, energy consumption, other stuff. They're going to create a lot of more productive, environment. In terms of safety, we have close to 35,000 fatalities, just in the U.S. And if you have all those technology out there, even a significantly reduce, all these accidents. And also the loss of delays that we have. So as it's going to evolve, in 20, 30 years, I figure that a lot of stuff is going to be resolved, going to be sorted out. It's still fairly new. A lot of policy going to be made. A lot of states are looking. Maybe I would say close to 80% of the states are looking for legislation, regulation into adopting this technology, or at least bringing companies to come and do the testing. So, and we have also the new generation. People, I was born, we're spending most time on our smartphone. We want to do other things. Driving is not, a lot of young kids, they're not jumping to get a driver license. It's not a big issue for them. And there was a study, actually for transit, when they offer the Wi-Fi on transit, as kids use public transit. It's not because they like public transit, because they have access to Wi-Fi, they can be on the phone, they can be on the computer, and they can, so that, that's what they want to do. They don't want to drive.
Driving is a distraction.
It's a distraction.
That's right.
So all this going to, there's a change. There's a change in the culture. There's a, demographic change. And so this is going to be involved. It's going to take time. It's only going to go through the up and down, but I'm certainly that the technology is going to come. There's investment that have been made. What about the shape that's going to take? But change is coming. There'll be some change, and we just have to. It's going to be sorted out. All these questions that we're raising, insurance, liability, all the stuff, it's challenged, but that's going to be resolved. I don't think it's going to be resolved, and it's going to be out there. So that's.
So I grew up in Massachusetts, and we used to go to a place called Canopy Lake Park in Salem, New Hampshire. And when I was a little kid, they had an electric car, and it's on tracks. And you put your kids in it, and it drives you very safely all around a controlled route with no emissions whatsoever and brings you back. And 40 years later, my kids are playing on that exact same thing. Meanwhile, cars are doing all their own stuff the same way they did it 40 years ago. So I think, the autonomous car is really fascinating. What, at least we're focused on, and what could be very practical, could be a bridge to the autonomous car, or just really good stuff that could do a lot of benefit now, are these bridge technologies or these new emerging technologies, which we can talk about them, but most cars, 98% more, 99% more, don't have them, and most people never use them, including hybrid and electric technologies. So, I do a lot of work in sustainability, and people sometimes talk about hybrid and electric technologies as they're passé. They're passé, but they've also passed by most people, because most people don't have them. Driver assist, brake control, rear view cameras, which is just going into federal law another year from now. But a lot of this stuff, which isn't on most cars now, which is new technology, could do tremendous benefit. They're the type of technologies that an autonomous car would have to have, right? So these are the technologies an autonomous car, in theory, is going to have. But if you can get them on vehicles now on the fleet and retail side, they can do a lot of good. They can reduce collisions tremendously. They can safeguard drivers, and they will establish a confidence and experience in these type of technologies that could lead you to that other future. So, in my kind of world, if 10 years from now every car was mandated to have driver assist and brake control and steering assist and lane management, I think that would be tremendous, and I think that would be the bridge that could get you to this kind of more, extraordinary future.
I totally agree, and I think it's going to be a step-by-step process. We're going to see a lot of these technologies that are coming out, people getting more comfortable. That kind of opens up the door for autonomous systems. So it's going to be a step-by-step, and as we go step-by-step, we'll figure out the regulatory, institution, policy aspects as well. But one of the important things that I forgot to mention earlier is that I don't think anybody has really figured out how to handle adverse weather. For most of these automated systems, what would it do in an adverse weather condition, in a snowstorm or icy conditions? I think that's still a really big problem. In one of the conferences, I was able to talk to the Google folks who's actually working on this Google X self-driving cars, and I asked them how they are dealing with bad weather, and the answer is, we're not there yet. I mean, we're just worried about how the system works today. We're not even worrying about how it operates heavy rain or snow or ice or anything like that. So I think that's also a very critical aspect to think about before we actually see these systems actually come in full force. So it's again going to be in controlled environments and limited capacity probably.
So we've talked about the role of the government and all too, but the things you've mentioned that are coming in are all things that OEM manufacturers, the OEMs see these as things that people want.
Yeah.
They're going to put self-braking on cars, they're going to put lane assist and the like on cars because people will buy them and pay for them. Do you think that the future trend is going to be led by the marketplace as opposed to the government?
Well, yes, but then, now take sustainability, right? So, hybrid technology is still a bit of a luxury technology, right? It's still an opt-in technology. But the federal government is driving nationally an increase in fuel economy standards and fuel economy requirements to this 52 miles per gallon by 2025, I believe. So, that could be where hybrid technologies that are somewhat luxury now become mandated or standard retail technologies because that's the only way to meet the fuel economy standards. So, for me, again, I mentioned it earlier, and one of the things we're very practically trying to work on is right now you can get on your BMW, you can get driver assistant automatic braking, but you can't on your baseline, I won't say a model, but on most of your baseline cars you can. So that's where policy could say, all right, if these are tremendous safety we don't view a seatbelt or an airbag as a luxury item, although one time they were less common. So that's where regulatory policy could help in saying, all right, now if these are safety technologies that can really have an impact on what goes on the road and protect people, then let's get them off luxury and let's help mandate them so that every car has them as opposed to your top shelf models have them. What we basically say, we do not want these to be trim, right? We want them to be standard. So that's where policy could really help as these technologies come into play. And even within our fleet world, right, we don't buy luxury cars, we don't buy trim. So I can't right now get, in very practical terms, I can't get a lot of these higher end technologies because they're only sold in the trim package. And so we say, well, you gotta. I'm not going to get plush leather seats because I don't want to be in the newspaper for getting plush leather seats and sunroofs and stereo systems and all the rest. But I do want your brake control. So you got to separate that for us. Right. And that's one of the things we've been talking to all the major manufacturers about.
Yeah, I think market will drive this space. I think market will definitely drive this space because it's very dynamic. It's changing every day, and it's a differentiator for different OEMs. Basically what the different types of applications that they come up with is a differentiator. For example, Mercedes has a traffic jam assist. People will like that because nobody likes driving in traffic. So yes, I think the market will definitely drive this space going forward. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the panel. This is really interesting. I learned a great deal about this neat stuff. I want to thank you all for coming. This is a really good panel. Thank you. Brian, or any closing remarks?
Sure. I guess I thank you all for coming again to echo Dan's sentiments, and thanks to panelists for this really comprehensive overview of this issue. We'll try to follow up and do some more discussion on this, and the video will be available if you want to send that around. Our next event will be May 27th. We're going to have a discussion on distributed energy resources and initiatives specifically in New York City, and we're going to co-host that with the New York City Economic Development Corporation. It'll be in their offices downtown on William Street. So keep an eye out for that. And any other? Sure. And we'll do a follow-up and keep you all abreast of what's going on in this area for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Yep. Thank you for the opportunity as well. So this is great.
Thank you. That was outstanding. That was really interesting. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it.